Thank you, Jussi. I believe the motivation part is done. Now is the time for the more boring civil servant view, or setting the scene. Where do we stand from the Division of Strategic Research point of view on when arranging the monitoring and evaluation of impact for strategic research programs? The idea is to give you a view where we stand at the moment in our planning process, what are the key questions that we have found out that should be solved, and then, as Jussi mentioned, we are leaving the floor mostly for the rest of the day to you to find out if the questions are good and what kind of responses would you suggest for these issues that we are tackling upon and still haven't exactly found out how to arrange in our evaluation processes. But as Jussi mentioned, strategic research programs, they are again facing a new moment of their program processes, and we as a division of strategic research, the council itself also is facing a new issue. Many of you have actually gone through from the eventual building phase, planning how the funding instrument actually works, how applications are taken in, how they are reviewed, and then the first years of how actually research programs and the consortia run. And now we are heading towards the final phase of research programs. How do we evaluate, did the strategic research programs achieve what they were set to do? As said, the law on Academy of Finland actually demands that Strategic Research Council both monitors and assesses the impact of the funded research programs. As have been mentioned previously, the ideas of monitoring and assessing are new in the framework of Academy of Finland. And then especially the idea that one needs to monitor and assess the impact is a special one. Now, most of the consortia in the strategic research would say, and I would say that too, the activities firstly are concentrating on research and interaction activities, but the law doesn't mention anything on those. The law mentions the impact, the final result that comes out of your activities, and what of course have been the overall aim from the very beginning. And then in the funding instruments framework, there are issues that need to be taken care of during the evaluation processes or the monitoring processes, that all the consortia, all programs are multidisciplinary, that they include scholars from various organizations. And this needed to be arranged, and we need to see what kind of cooperation comes between disciplines and organizations, how that cooperation benefits the funding instrument's aims. But impact is the main thing here. Now, assessment activities, of course, for Division of Strategic Research, that's our bread and butter. That's what we mostly do. We've listed here 4 issues where we are part of these assessment activities. Now, the first one is the most familiar one, that scholars send their applications in once a call has been arranged, and the division takes care of organizing the review process and the decision process, and at the end the Research Council decides which applications are actually funded. Now, the second and the third one highlighted there are the ones that we are discussing today. How to arrange the ongoing monitoring of programs, and then how to arrange the ex-post evaluation at the end of research programs. The fourth one, evaluation of the whole funding instrument, is a bit of out of our hands, and rather an idea that somebody outside from the funding instrument comes to evaluate and follow what was actually achieved with this funding instrument. But of course, even there, the council and the division supporting it has a say to mention how could this be arranged, and at least to give its opinion and views on the matters. Now on the issues, the second and the third issues, we arranged, well, you know about the ongoing monitoring issues. That's part of these processes. And last summer, we arranged our first mid-term assessment process. Quite quick checkup, concentrating on the very first 3 programs that started their activities in 2015, and the practical point of checking if the Council sees that all programs, all consortia in those programs are proceeding as wished and can be funded for their second funding period. There were no external reviewers there. This was done by the Division of Strategic Research and the Council itself. But the real issue here is that we are heading now for the first final program assessments. The 4 programs that started their activities in 2016 will finish their activities, or the funding period will finish at the end of August next year. And the first idea is that after that, one should arrange and organize the final evaluation process during the autumn 2019 and the spring 2020. And this is the process that we are currently creating, and we need your input and ideas for that process too. We are at our division, we are facing 3 main challenges. What are we aiming at first? What on earth is this impact that should be assessed? Then, what is actually the key moment when this impact can be noticed, or what will be the best time to evaluate it, or how it's been achieved? And then finally, if we manage to determine what is impact and when to follow it, how we actually plan and then execute this assessment process. Our preliminary answers to the 3 questions, but those are very preliminary and needs to be discussed, even in the sense that are these the right questions to tackle upon. What comes to the impact, we realize that at the moment that there's no one definition of impact that we would like to use when the evaluation of the programs is on the table. Rather, each program has their own aims for impact that are based on the program descriptions, following those descriptions that were the basis for the applications that you sent in and were funded. One should find what are the program aims, where should the consortia and the separate entities and together aim at. Now this means that we have at the moment 10 different program impact aims. And they vary, of course, on the basis also that what kind of consortia and how big consortia were taken into the particular program. How long these programs are, how much time did they have to work upon these issues. And then our program directors have pointed out too that there are many links in between the programs, and sometimes consortia that meet from 2 different programs have actually much more issues together that they can discuss than the consortia in one particular program. How to manage with these different links and connections that go over the formal program borders. So whatever assessment process we are arranging, it needs to target these varying impact possibilities according to the program aims. Then what is this impact actually? Previously, at least from the civil servant level, we have quite easily discussed about 3 activities that you are doing. That you're doing research, you're doing interaction, and then out comes the impact. Well, lately we have made this a little bit more complicated and put it into these 6 phases that we see that are or should be happening. We get the input, or you have created the input, planning what kind of research agenda, what kind of aims will be good for a particular program. You have set the resources, and Council has found out that these plans and resources are the right ones for that particular program and should be funded. Now, through the funding period, you of course have your research and interaction activities, but what are actually those impact results that come out of these activities are not necessarily and simply impact. At the moment, we put them in these three classes: outputs, outcomes, and impact. And on the left side, you see how we try to translate those in Finnish. Outputs probably are the changes in law, creating business, non-governmental organizations changing their habits because you have shown them research results, you have created interaction with them, and caused or been part of the changes or creating these outputs. Outcomes we see as what actually happened based on these changes or new issues. Consortia aims or goals, one would say. And then impact probably targets more on the program level. And this is something actually that from the division point of view, we haven't much discussed on the monitoring or the ongoing monitoring. That targets much more on the consortia level than the program level. Now, what for us has caused difficulties is that all issues in that blue box we have quite easily discussed under the heading impact. And as mentioned, there are at least 3 different kind of issues there, and they vary according to the programs and according to the consortia even. And one can very easily say that also the research activities and interaction activities may have, and in many cases in your consortia, they actually do have events, actions and methods that are already part of the overall impact assessment. One might think co-creation, co-design workshops with your stakeholders, that already you can say that they are at least have been informed and seem to have taken your messages up. But all these 5 stages apparently can be included in the overall impact definition. And then the second issue that we are discussing is when can we actually see any of these stages taking place? Now, what's easy for us is, of course, the input, the application that comes before anything starts. Then during the research process phase, we see research, interaction activities. But where on earth do we situate in this timeline your specific outputs, outcomes, and impact? When do they actually take place? And the difficulty for us is that based on how evaluation activities work at the Academy of Finland, you can see those 3 black lines there pointing out when do we have different kind of evaluation activities. Now, evaluating applications is easy, that happens before, but already midterm assessment is something that, what are we actually aiming at there? Research and interaction activities, sure, but is there any outputs, outcomes, impact already in place then that you can tell about to us, and then the council can understand and evaluate if this direction that you're taking is the right one. More pressing is the idea what happens at the ex post evaluation, what can be seen approximately 1 year after the funding period has finished, or is this actually the right time to even try to check what's going on with the outputs, outcomes, and impact, as they may take place much, much later in the timeline. And of course, for each consortia, there is not one specific time and location when these things happen. They take time for a longer period and go on top of each other, and there's no linear model for sure through the stages. So, if final evaluation is arranged immediately after the funding period finishes, what are we actually assessing? Or that's our key question. And then finally, the third issue, how to assess. What kind of information, documents, meetings, interviews are needed for arranging a fair and balanced evaluation process. Now, at the moment, we feel that the indicators that we ask you to submit and the impact case studies that we ask you to submit, they do cover quite many of these stages, but they do concentrate on the beginning phases. We get good cover on the research and interaction activities, but once we move towards the outputs and outcomes, the information that we get through those documents doesn't cover all the issues that we should know. And rightly so, they are not the best ways to get that kind of information. And of course, both documents and instruments are also ongoing forms. The information that we get through them gets better and gets fuller through the period that you work. But for sure, for this last stage, understanding what's happening on the program level, about that we have no idea at the moment. That needs to be solved and seen in a different way. What is that way? We don't know yet. So, those are the three questions that we're working through at the Division of Strategic Research, and we would like to hear your views on those issues. The main idea is to find out how to get a fair and balanced overview of consortia and program activities and achievements through these evaluation processes, how to assess these activities fairly when there are a multitude of activities and impacts through the programs. And then finally, yes, how not to overburden ourselves. And this is not only for civil servants that we will be running after you through the months, but also the fact that especially the final evaluation will take place after the funding period of programs is finished. And of course, how to make you enthusiastic about the whole reporting and assessing process at the time when the funds are already gone is an important question. And this needs mutual cooperation and understanding why to arrange this kind of practice in the first place. Now, you noticed in the program we have planned workshops for the afternoon where we hear all your views and collect them and try to answer some of your questions too. But to start the discussion, to set the scene, Jussi already introduced our two keynote speakers, Stephen Hill and Gemma Derrick. We will hear their presentations on the issue of how to evaluate research impact first, and then we have a panel discussion led by the chair of Strategic Research Council, Per Mikwits, and then besides Stephen and Gemma, we have two program directors, Olli Kangas and Riitta Kosonen, joining for the panel discussion. And hopefully already there we will have a lot of good questions and discussion on this matter.